Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are going to distill the completely unbelievable multi-hyphenate life of Arnold Schwarzenegger into actionable blueprints for reinvention. We're going to figure out how one guy managed to conquer three entirely different worlds, and more importantly, how we can actually use his framework in our own lives.
So let's dive right in. How exactly does a kid growing up in post-World War II Austria, in a house with literally no plumbing, no money, and a thick accent, go on to conquer global bodybuilding, become the highest-paid actor in Hollywood, and then get elected to run American politics in the country's most populous state? I mean, it sounds like a bad movie script, right? But it was actually a highly calculated, repeatable process.
Just look at the sheer scale of these jumps on the timeline here. In 1968, he arrives in the US with basically nothing but a gym bag. 2 years later, he's Mr. Universe. Fast forward to 1984, and he's fundamentally shifting pop culture with The Terminator. And by 2003, he's sworn in as governor of California, running the fifth largest economy in the world. To understand how he made these frankly impossible jumps, we have to look at his first major operating principle.
This brings us to Phase 1, the power of a hyper-specific vision.
You see, Arnold's early life was defined by treating his ambition not as some vague, fluffy dream, but as a hard science. When he was a kid, he didn't just passively admire bodybuilder Reg Park on a movie screen. No, he went out, found a magazine with Park on the cover, and treated it as his literal gospel. He knew if he wanted to be Hercules, he had to meticulously copy Park's exact blueprint, step by agonizing step.
It's incredibly systematic. He adopted a proven training blueprint and worked relentlessly for 5 hours a day. He didn't just lift weights. He used his own body as an experiment. He'd do 40 reps of a specific exercise and then carefully track exactly where he felt sore the next day to dissect his muscle response. He realized early on that putting in the raw work, combined with an unshakable belief in your vision, is what truly moves the needle. And honestly, that's a strategy any of us can apply to our own goals.
Moving on to Phase 2, defying the naysayers.
When Arnold first decided to pivot and conquer Hollywood, the industry experts universally told him he was out of his mind. The leading men of the 1970s were guys like Al Pacino and Dustin Hoffman, smaller, very dialogue-heavy performers. Agents bluntly told Arnold, "You're too big, you weigh 250 pounds, and your accent is way too thick." But instead of getting discouraged, he took those exact perceived flaws and used them to carve out roles that no traditional leading man could ever pull off. I mean, his massive size was an absolute requirement to play Conan the Barbarian, and that heavy, mechanical delivery, that's exactly what made The Terminator so iconic.
He truly lived by the idea that what does not kill you will make you strong. Whether it was dealing with his strict father growing up or Hollywood producers telling him to just go open a health food store, he actively used discouragement as fuel. When people told him something was impossible, it didn't crush him. Actually, it ignited a fire in his belly to prove them wrong.
He was so fiercely dedicated to his specific vision that he wasn't afraid to push back, even against massive directors. Take The Terminator, for example. James Cameron originally wrote the line, "I'll be back," but Arnold actually argued with him, insisting it should be, "I will be back," because it sounded more robotic, less human. Cameron famously told him not to tell him how to write, but they eventually compromised by shooting it multiple ways before picking that iconic take. It just goes to show how deeply he protected his unique brand.
Which leads us right into Phase 3, Master of the Deal.
Before we even talk about his massive movie checks from the 80s and 90s, we really have to look at how he always bet on his own business acumen. Because Arnold wasn't just a muscle man. He had a phenomenal nose for business right out of the gate. When he first came to America, he saved up every single dollar he could from bodybuilding seminars, bricklaying, and a mail order business. He scraped together exactly $26,000. And then he took that cash and invested it into a 6-unit apartment building. That savvy real estate move made him a millionaire before he ever hit it big on the silver screen.
And that exact same willingness to invest in himself led to a historic deal for the 1988 comedy Twins. Studios were absolutely terrified to cast an action star in a comedy. So Arnold made them an offer they couldn't refuse, one that resulted in a staggering $260 million global box office.
Let's break down how genius this deal was. Arnold, his co-star Danny DeVito, and director Ivan Reitman agreed to take absolutely $0 in upfront salary. None. The studio only had to cover the incredibly low $16.5 million production budget. But in exchange, the trio took a massive percentage of the back-end profits. By entirely removing the studio's financial risk, Arnold created a massive upside for himself. He orchestrated a deal so incredibly lucrative that studio executives literally told him he robbed them blind. It is a brilliant lesson in the power of removing risk for your partners to create a total win-win scenario.
Okay, let's jump to Phase 4, the political pivot. Going from an action movie star to the governor of California seems incredibly abrupt, right? But the groundwork for this massive reinvention was laid decades earlier. The seed was actually planted by Richard Nixon. During an event at the Nixon Library in the 80s, Arnold was called up to speak totally unscripted. He did so well that Nixon pulled him aside and told him, "You have political instincts. You should run for governor." Nixon recognized Arnold's organic, natural ability to connect with an audience.
Fast forward to 2003. California was in utter chaos. They were facing a major economic crisis, rolling blackouts, and a rare recall election for the sitting governor. Now, because it was a recall, it bypassed the standard, highly partisan primary system. This was Arnold's perfect window. Running as a moderate outsider, he bypassed the extreme wings of both political parties, famously announced his run on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, and just spoke directly to the voters. He positioned himself as the ultimate underdog against the political establishment, and it worked. He won.
But once he got to Sacramento, he faced a deeply divided legislature stuck in partisan gridlock. His solution? Well, it became known as smoking tent diplomacy. It was the strategic act of bringing warring political factions into an informal cigar tent to forge bipartisan agreements. He basically created an ingenious workaround to state smoking bans by building a massive smoking tent right in the Capitol courtyard.
This is just a perfect masterclass in pragmatic problem solving. He would invite rival lawmakers to this tent. They'd take off their suit jackets, light a cigar, and suddenly they weren't political enemies anymore. They were just humans having a relaxed conversation. Through this setup, he managed to negotiate massive, historic, environmental, and infrastructure laws. He proved that you don't treat the other side as the enemy. You find common, human ground, and you negotiate from there.
Finally, we arrive at Phase 5, always climbing the next peak.
This is the underlying philosophy that keeps him moving forward. Even after facing terrifying, life-threatening open-heart surgeries, and after reaching the absolute pinnacle of 3 distinct industries, he just refuses to stop. He draws constant inspiration from Sir Edmund Hillary, the first man to ever successfully climb Mount Everest. When Hillary was asked what he looked for when he reached the highest summit in the world, he simply said, "I saw another peak." Arnold adopted this exact mindset. Achieving a goal isn't an excuse to sit back on your laurels. It's simply a new vantage point to find your next great challenge.
So the crucial takeaway from this explainer is exactly that. You can't just arrive and stop. You have to stay hungry, block out the naysayers, lean into your unique traits, and build a hyper-specific vision. Now that you have the blueprint, the only question left is, what is the next peak you are going to climb to be useful to the world?